Welcome to this podcast in a series of 6 concerning the faculty's engagement with members of the public, its members and its potential new members, and also from another perspective, engaging with local authorities. And it's on that particular topic that I'm privileged to welcome Dil Gujral here today, who is Chief Surveyor of the company 1996 Party Wall Surveyor, a member of the faculty and a long-time supporter and assistant to the board of faculties. And so Dil is going to come along and talk to us now about engaging with local authorities. So Dil, you have embarked on an initiative for the faculty to offer local authorities CPD training on the Act. What brought about this initiative?
So thank you for having me here, Stephen. First, it's usually when we interact with local authorities, you realise they don't actually understand their role and responsibilities. They've been given a role by the government in the legislation, and because the government guidance is incomplete, they somehow miss that out. And so what I'm trying to do is explain and enlighten them and give a little training on how the Act works and how they're quite key to one of the aspects of the Party Wall Act.
And without obviously naming any names, you obviously, in a very experienced surveyor, you obviously have engaged with individuals perhaps from local authorities and got some feedback maybe. And I'm an ex-local authority worker myself, and whereas they do seem to provide certain areas of training, the Party Wall Act, in so many disciplines, seems to be treated more as of an activity than a discipline, doesn't it? And perhaps, do you feel that's why it's largely ignored? It's at the bottom of the list in terms of training for local authorities?
Yeah, well, I can't actually blame the way they see the Act, because the Act is framed in a way that you go off and deal with it. It's a private matter for homeowners and building owners and people doing works. And hence, they've sort of missed an aspect of the Act that's quite key, especially if you're a surveyor and you're acting with local authorities. And I'm sure you've done as an experienced surveyor, where you had occasion to ring them up and say, who's your appointing officer? And the reaction, it doesn't matter how many authorities you ring up, the reaction is standard reaction, nothing to do with us, Gov, go away, sort it out yourself. So you spend a few minutes trying to explain all the nuances of it. And I actually don't blame the people on the other side of the phone or the email saying, it's nothing to do with us. So that's the aspect of training we're trying to get across to.
It's a very good point you make, because more often than not, it is the Act is dealing with a dispute, in inverted commas, between private individuals, isn't it? I know we can have companies involved, but that's the way it's perceived generally, isn't it? And we're talking about a public sector involvement here, and you can see where the confusion probably arises. So what is the faculty proposing to do to address this then, Dil?
Yeah, so for a while when you're working on your own, you're coming across this, you're thinking, is it me or is there something missing here? And when you speak to other surveyors, said, yeah, I've had the same problem. So a number of times you're saying, this is a consistent problem. So how do we address it? And we've put together with Alex and the rest of the board, we put together a training that will hopefully help local authorities to deal with this aspect and save them time and effort in resources.
You mentioned Alex, that's Alex Frame, isn't it?
That's right,
yeah,
Alex Frame.
The president of the faculty. And Alex, like you, has a great deal of contact with local authorities with his town planning, building regulation aspect of his architectural practice, doesn't he? So that's a good combination, isn't it, the two of you, sort of seeing it from a wider perspective as well. And is it really felt, I mean, I know you've already touched upon it, but it's felt that local authorities aren't currently engaging in this then in any meaningful way, not through their own volition or their own choice, but just circumstances. Is that the way you see it?
I don't actually blame the local authorities for stepping away, because the legislation is seen as a private piece of legislation. However, when the government framed it, they put in a very key role. As a surveyor, that I find is a key role for local authorities, which is that of an appointing officer. So what I'm trying to do is explain how they got there, what the role of the appointing officer is, and how they can deal with it in a very effective and efficient manner.
The all-important question is really then about the course itself, and it's 59 minutes. Why 59 minutes still?
Yeah, I didn't want to take over an hour because look, time's valuable for everybody, and we're all busy.
Yes.
So my aim was to get across as much as I could in the least amount of time. So that's why I think about it as 59 minutes, but it's an hour's CPD.
Very good. Would it be covering things such as pre-notice checks and searches?
Yeah, so one of the aspects I go through is how to do notices properly. And in there, I call it the 3 NPs, and where we go through the process for covering a notice properly, doing the pre-notice searches that we all do as surveyors.
How to serve party wall notices correctly? That's an old chestnut, isn't it? But still one that crops up. That's
my favourite, almost my second favourite question, I'd say, is how, and the way I address it is how not to do party wall notices. I won't go into it now, because I'd like people to come on the course. But there's a common way that people think party wall notices should be served, and in fact, it's usually wrong. So we go through how to do it properly.
And is this giving the local authorities some context as to how things arrive at their door? I don't know if the appointing officer would be looking at pre-notice checks and so forth, but they need to know what the process is, don't they, in the greater scheme of things, and their involvement. And so in the same vein, so we've talked about pre-notice checks and searches, how to serve party wall notices. What will you also be covering things such as what if there's no reply to a notice?
Exactly. Obviously, your experience in the matter. So we go through how do you do searches for a notice? How do you do a notice? And the next question that follows on from that is, I didn't get a reply. Can I start my work? So that's another frequently asked question, and number of inquiries I get in saying, we sent a notice. Well, actually, what they say is we've sent a party wall agreement. That's the usual phrase that people use. It's actually a notice. We've sent a party wall agreement, and we've had no reply. Can we carry on with the works? And in fact, that's not true. And for a long time, I thought, why am I being asked this question all the time? And when I looked into it, read the government legislation, although they updated it a few years ago, they actually haven't addressed the point, which is, if you do not get a reply, you need to follow the 10-4 process. And that's completely missing out of the government guidance on this, on the Act.
Yeah, another one that sort of, I guess, really occurred to me was local authorities really thinking about that 10-4 process, as you say. And but they're often being asked, by members of the public anyway, aren't they, about various party wall aspects? I mean, in your experience in speaking to building control officers, are they often expected to have an answer? Do the public come to them as some sort of public service to ask questions, as well as, the surveyors going to them to appoint a third surveyor, or select a third surveyor, I should say?
There's two different aspects. So you've got the public asking for guidance because in their minds, the council's dealing with the planning, they're dealing with building controls, so they're probably dealing with the party wall aspects. And then in terms of the council's role, they're thinking, well, it's a private piece of legislation, it's nothing to do with us, but they have a really key role for surveyors in that one of the key appointments is a third surveyor. And that opens up our own can of worms. We get a lot of questions on the third surveyor. Who appoints them? What do they do? How do I have to pay for another surveyor? So that's public questions. But more specifically for local authorities, for us as surveyors, that's a key appointment. And the appointing officer sits on top of that. And it's a really vital role. But fulfilling it actually doesn't take that long once they understand how to do it.
Key question I probably should have asked you before this really was then, why do surveyors approach a local authority to select a third surveyor? Perhaps you can explain to our viewers and listeners why that instance would arise. Why do the two surveyors go to the local authority to appoint a surveyor?
That's a key task that local authorities have been given by the government. And I'm not going to go into it now, but I'll explain why the third surveyor is so important on my training. And that all makes sense why. Once you understand the importance of the third surveyor, how they're appointed, then you go on to look at why local authorities need to get involved in this magic piece of
It's because, I mean, the two surveyors just can't agree on the selection of a third surveyor, isn't it? And so, the default position is going to the local authority, isn't it? But I think also there's the issue, I think what confuses the public is that often when they get building regulation consent and or planning, it will say, you need to ensure that it complies with the Party Wall Act. And I think people look at that and think, well, this is a directive coming from the local authority, don't they? In my experience, I find that people say, well, the local authority mentioned it. That's why I've gone back to them and asked all these questions. But the faculty's president, Alex Frame, he talks on another episode in this podcast about the various books he's written. And he's obviously worked closely with you on this in Misunderstandings and Guidance, which is really the seminal book as far as the faculty is concerned, and its members and members of the public as well. And he identifies, like you've identified specifically, issues dealing with local authorities. He identifies these misunderstandings that crop up. And will that be introduced to the local authorities as well as part of the course, this book that Alex has written?
Alex's book is a great book. My view on it is it's more for surveyors and experts in the field. And I've had to use it in the past to dig up I actually had a bet with someone on one of the aspects, and I had to dig that up as proof. But in terms of the local authority training that I'm going to be going through, the questions are more common and more to the lay public. So I go through it in a section called Misunderstandings and Myths. So it's really fun. And one of the questions I talk about is the key question, $64,000 question, as I put it: who pays the surveyor's costs and why? So that's, and then we go on to other misunderstandings that the public see through their dealings with just reading about it on the internet. So everybody goes to the internet to get an idea of stuff that's going on. But there's critical key questions that are missing there, and I'll run through all of those.
How will you approach the local authority? I mean, first of all, I suppose for the layperson watching as well, who is the appointing officer in the local authority?
Yeah, that's a great question. So once you understand the critical role of the third surveyor, I then talk about how they get appointed, and where two surveyors cannot agree on a third surveyor, the local authority is tasked with someone called an appointing officer. Now, the appointing officer isn't actually defined who carries out the task, but usually it's someone in the building control. It's usually the chief building control officer, or someone very high up in building control, or planning, the planning side of it, or perhaps it could be somebody else in the legal department. The issue occurs is that local authorities don't understand they have a role in this, that they have a role and responsibility to act as an appointing officer. And finally, once they understand those two aspects, the actual task is very easy in itself. And the way I look at it is, if I'm stepping into the local authority's shoes, you're wasting all this time taking all these phone calls. Let me help you shortcut the process. Let me help you save a bunch of time and resources. Get straight to the point so you'll know what to do. So that's what I'm trying to achieve with this training.
It's commendable that you come up with this initiative and you've got this course, but will this is the 59-minute course, 59-minute course. But what about follow-ups? I mean, like it's all particularly if it is the appointing officer, he's probably being called upon in so many things. Is there an opportunity to follow up with you? How do you foresee that taking place? They've set the course online, I guess. Would it be, or?
So yeah, the course is a online Zoom training, and our plan is to have a continuing program of the same courses. We have a Q&A at the end of each course, and they can obviously send questions in. We'll answer questions there and then. There's also additional resources we provide for them. There's booklets, there's the faculty that they can look up, and also we try and provide what we call an example informative that they should really put in with any notices, planning and building control notices. So it's just trying to make everybody's journey easier in the process.
Because the local authorities indirectly are obviously referred to more than one occasion in the Act, aren't they? They're obviously referred to in the instance where the two surveyors can't agree in the selection of a third surveyor, so they're there. But there's also section 7.5 of the Act, where it says that all works in relation to this Act must comply with all statutory requirements, which will be, and the statutory requirements will include building regs again. And I'm just wondering also, we do know, don't we, in the faculty, that there are members that are building control officers. And in this podcast series, we've got one of our members talking to us about his role as a building control officer. So there's an opportunity for members actually to assist you, I guess, as well, in engaging with local authorities too. Local authorities they're working with, or approved inspectors, I guess, as well.
Like with anything in life, it's a two-way streak, and my objective is trying to help those guys, to help them achieve their role. And yes, the local authority officer you mentioned has been very kindly, and I've had some conversations where he's literally said, yes, I've literally had a conversation with another fellow building control officer exactly on the subject you're talking about. So, it's sort of, when you create a training, you think, is this going to be useful for people? That's how you realise there is a use for it.
And although there's lots of changes taking place in building control, isn't there, at the moment, revolutionary, the fact is that as far as the Act is concerned, local authorities' responsibilities are the same. And there's no talk yet about the Act being amended or revised in any shape or form. So how do you see things moving forward with this connection, this interaction between the faculty and building control?
The way I see it, the faculty is a training organisation. We're here to provide training, and a key aspect of that is the local authorities. So we're here to help them understand and achieve training. They obviously get an hour CPD certificate, which is valuable to everyone. And more importantly, understand the Act and what they need to do and the role they need to play. Also achieve it in a time and resource sufficient manner.
Very good. And finally then, in the last sort of minute or two, have you found that because of this, there's been unnecessary delays in the selection by a local authority of a third surveyor?
Oh yes, in my personal experience, it's always a bit of a, I would say, a torture session, or a bit hard work trying to get through to the idea. What I can promise you is, if you're a member of the local authority, please attend the training course. It's free, and I will try and make it the best use of your 59 minutes you've spent in a while. So that's my promise to you, and hopefully it'll be entertaining as well.
Very good, Dil. Well, I can vouch for that, having known Dil for many years and how passionate he is about this subject. And following the theme of this podcast series, all about engagement, faculty engaging with members of the public, its members, potential members, and as Dil's eloquently put over, engaging with the local authorities. Thank you again for that, Dil, and thank you for listening.